Hey everybody, this is Karma Jones, and I am here to talk about the mental cult, right? A lot of us are in a mental cult, and you know what? Firsthand, I can truly say that I am guilty for going in and out of the vortex and getting into the mental cult. However, I've been trying very, very hard throughout like the past probably 4 to 5 years staying in the vortex. And if you need to know what the vortex is, check out Abraham Hicks on YouTube and you can find out what the vortex is. It's a great place to be in, a great spiritual, mental place to be in, but if you're not in the vortex, then you are in a mental cult. So let me explain what a mental cult is. A mental cult is, you know, having a mindset with false prophecies seeming real, but you have lots of people around you who are agreeing to what you are thinking. So I don't know if you ever heard the terminology that what you think is not real. It's actually not real. So let me explain why it's not real, and then we'll get into the mental cult because I got somebody I want to talk about that's in that mental cult. So when you let's just get an example, right? Say that you took off of work, right? And you know that you weren't really sick, but you called in and pretended you were sick, right? So then you start to think of what that day is going to be like when you go to work the next day, and you get it all into the snowball effect about how it looks, who's going to be snarling at you, who's going to believe you, and everything seems very, very negative, right? And very, very negative. Just basically all you're doing is just thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong. You know why it's not real? Because it didn't happen yet. So it's not real. So you are giving energy to something that is not real, right? So if it didn't happen and it didn't take a physical form, it didn't happen. It's not real. But you make it real by giving it energy. So what happens is if you keep thinking about it, what happens, it starts to materialize into realness, right? So and this is how you get into the mental cult, right? So then when you start to think about it so much, you start to call people. And now you're in a mental cult because they're agreeing with you. And then they're adding to it and it make it seem worse. Well, I have a person like that. My husband is in a mental cult. And this is what happens. Things happen. We all have things that happen. So people who are in a vortex, what happens, they go from problem to solution. People who are in a mental cult, what happens is they go from problem to denial, and then they go to doubt, and then they go to frustration, and then along the way they're calling people who are in the mental cult that helps them capitalize off that, build on it, build. So you already built the foundation of negative thought, and then you got everyone else building you floor for floor in your apartment building, which is called the mental cult, right? So then what happens is you actually materialize that, right? So my husband is in a mental cult, and I am surrounded by plenty of people that's in a mental cult. So what happens is I have to why being in a vortex is can become very challenging is that you have to fight against those things because they see you as being different. So my husband is always saying that I'm the type of person that seems like I don't care. It's not that I don't care. What it is that I go from problem to solution and he goes through the mental cult. So it takes him a while to get there. And so when I have already dealt with that situation, he's continuing to go through that situation for maybe days, maybe a month. And basically, I have already handled it. I came to a solution and I dealt with it. People who are in a mental cult will stay in that, um, for lack of a better term, that misery roller coaster for a good while. And so what happens is they spend a lot of time there. And what they use as their evidence is, oh, it's been done before. And oh, I'm just going off of experience. So it's bound to happen like that. So what happens is basically they feel like it happened before, that it's always going to happen. So you put that energy to that. And when you put that energy to that, what happens is basically you already dictate what that outcome is going to be. So let's get back to the example of you calling out of work, right? So what happens is that you go off of things. So when you start to think about what could or would have should happen, what happens is that you actually sit there and you kind of gather evidence, right? So your evidence to make the thought seem so real and that it is bound to happen is you go off for things that happened in the past or things you heard that happened to someone else, and then you materialize them. But what happens if you didn't do that? Did you ever try to not do that? And if you try not to do that, maybe you would have a different outcome, right? So let's go to my husband for a minute. So my husband is in a mental cult, and this is what happens. So we get a situation. Let me just think of a situation that we had because we had plenty of them. And he always gets stuck in this mental cult. And I'm kind of like, the mental cult is kind of like a form of superheroes, right? They get all their powers together and they get together and they create this, this cult idea that it's gonna, and they fight against who is the vortex superhero, which is me, and they try to fight against me to say that I'm wrong, and he has all these superheroes backing his theory. And what happens is I wind up looking like the outsider, right? Because I refuse to go into the mental cult. So what happens is I'm trying to think of like a really quick scenario, because there's so many, and I kind of like dealt with it in my vortex way. I don't have like a immediate resource to mind, so I'm just kind of sitting here thinking of one scenario that I can come up with. And let me think. What could I think of? Because we like. So I'm thinking. Okay, so um, let's just say, um, uh, I don't have one right now. Okay, okay, I got one. So this is what he loves to pay, bills on the day. So there are a lot of times that I have already planned things, and I planned before, and he'll get like really really like, oh, you got to make it over there today, right? He couldn't have paid it like maybe 30 days before. He had to wait till that day to get it paid. So I may not pay it on that day because I work in the vortex. It have to feel right, and things that I already had planned, I wanted to execute. But he feels like I should just drop everything and be able to run and do what he wasn't supposed to do, right? I mean, well, he supposed to do that he didn't do. And so what happens is he gets frustrated because his intention was to get it done, but he decided not to get it done in a, I guess, timely manner. So what happens is he decides that he'll ask me to do it. And when you ask someone else to do something, You have to respect in the manner of the way they do it. But he thinks I'm supposed to drop everything and go over there. So what happens is he gets to the point of feeling I don't care. I don't care if the bill get paid. And that's not absolutely true. It's just that I work in the vortex of the situation, and I do things when it feels right and when I have a timely vortex time, if that makes any sense. But he wants me to drop it and just go because we both own the house. But that's not, if I had any say into it, it would have been done before the time. But he likes to wait until the day of, which causes him frustration, and then he goes through the whole mental cult thing. So when he gets into that and I say, hey, you know what? I'll make it there tomorrow because today I have things planned, and it probably have to do with some mental work, or doing some things for me. And then what he does is, I mean, I hope this doesn't sound selfish. It's just that it's not that I wasn't going to do it. It's more or less that I can do it when I'm in greater space, right? And so that greater space will probably be the next day, and it will probably be, but then he will get frustrated, right? Frustrated and act and basically use the words that I don't care what's going on, I don't care about things that are important. That's not true, because I do care about things that are important. It's just that he decides to do it at a time that doesn't work for me. So then he goes into this cult behavior, right? This mental cult. The mental cult behavior is when the person starts to think of what are all the worst outcomes. Oh, I'm going to get a late payment. I mean, it's going to be late, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and the world is going to end. And then once they get that mindset, they go and call a person who can co-sign, and this is where the cult starts. They co-sign. Oh yeah, yeah, she should have just ran over there. It was not a big deal. It wouldn't have took much out of her day. Da da da. And then basically he calls another person who co-signs and be like, yeah, that's truly like messed up. She could have went over there. It wouldn't have took much. And like, what is she doing all day that she couldn't have done it? And then he calls another person, and this is what happens. And they all feel like this is really, really like the best scenario. Like I should just drop everything and just go. And it seems simple, but it's not as simple as that. And when he gets into his cult, he gets all this evidence. So now we're talking about gathering evidence, right? And the evidence is everyone agrees with him. This has happened before, and this is the way it works. And it's not absolutely true. It's only true. It only was in his mind, right? So all of that was in his mind. It didn't. It was not. It was not physical, right? It was not physical happenings. It was just his thoughts of that was going to happen, right? So, and then the proof came along with that has happened before, so that corroborate his thoughts. And then what happens is his mental cult, his cult of people co-signed that, yeah, that's going to happen. You're going to get a late payment. It's going to fall on you. That's totally messed up. She shouldn't do that. Like all of those things. And then what happens is, still at that point, it's still just words. It's still just thoughts. It didn't materialize itself, right? It didn't materialize itself. And so basically what happens is, the more he thinks about it, the more he get his cult together, and they get their superpowers together. They are going to formulate a physical outcome of that. But what happens, right? What happens when a person in a vortex powers are much stronger than that? And what happens when I go the next day, meet a really, really nice person? We have a great talk. They never put it in as late. And then what happens is if he doesn't get one. Isn't that a possible scenario? But when people get into this mental cult and they're surrounded by people who have the same thought process, and this is why they say you should get out of the get out of your social group that everyone thinks like you, because all it does is materialize those mental cult thoughts into reality, right? Because all of them agree with you. But when you have someone on the side that doesn't do that, and you're like me, like I've always been an outsider, like I've always been someone who's been outside of the norm. I've been a sentience ever since I was a kid, and I've been in and out of the vortex behavior many, many times before, in and out, in and out. Right now, I'm in the vortex, and I've danced in and out of it a couple of times throughout my life. But when you have someone over there who says, no, no, it's not always going to be working like that, that you have to have vortex behavior, think positive that that's not the end result. They always seem to look at you as if you are the weird, crazy, or you don't care one, right? So, um, so yeah, so that is basically the mental cult. I'm just gonna go over that a bit. So basically, the mental cult is a person who starts to mentally um, start to think of things that false prophecy, right? Because it's not real, because it hasn't materialized yet. And then what they do is the cult comes in is when they call people that are going to agree with them and actually get their superpowers together and actually materialize whatever that negative or adverse idea is, and actually make it materialize. And then when it does materialize, they don't think that they caused it. It just kind of like, see, it happened. You know what? It always happens like that. I knew it. I knew that's what was going to happen. But it's always that chance of what if it didn't. If you get into the vortex, and I say vortex, and if you don't know what the vortex is, again, listen to Abraham Hicks on YouTube, and you will find out what the vortex is. But if you get in the mindset in the vortex where things are possible and things can be changed mentally, it's the same way if you can project negative outcome, you can project positive outcome. Which would you rather? Would you rather that negative one materialize or the positive one to materialize? And you know what? Positive ones is more of basically like what do you call it? It's manifesting, right? So you are manifesting those things to happen. It's the same way when you have the negativity, you are manifesting for it to happen. When you get those original thoughts, you are manifesting it to happen. So why not change? Get out of your mental cult and get into the vortex and change your manifestation to more positivity. And, I just hope that anyone that is listening to me, I'm using this as like kind of therapy, because it is a struggle to be in the vortex, and then your partner is not in the vortex. It becomes a little of a challenge, a big of a challenge sometimes. And, because you are perceived to be something that, they are not claiming you to be. And most of the time it's negative. But yeah. So basically, I am doing this again, like I said, for therapy, and I hope that you has learned something from this. And if you want to hear more about what my thoughts are, just listen to more of my YouTube podcast, so to speak. Right. So, all right, guys, have a great one. This is Karma Jones, and I'm signing out. hang out more with me while you're drinking your coffee and tea, like, share, and subscribe.